September morning that I should find myself once again swept into the orbit of Hercule Poirot's curious adventures. The season had begun to turn. The air bore a faint crispness, the hedgerows were flushed with berries, and London seemed more restless than usual. It was then that I received a letter, written in the flowing, patrician hand of my old school acquaintance, Charles Greville. The letter was brief but insistent. My dear Hastings, you will forgive, I trust, the liberty of this sudden invitation. My father celebrates his 60th birthday next week, and it would give me the greatest pleasure if you would spend the weekend with us at Rosewood Manor. The house will be full of company, and though you may find us a little old-fashioned, I am certain you will not lack amusement. Do come. Yours ever, Charles. I confess I was touched. It had been years since I had last seen Charles, and though a youth, he had always seemed the sort to prefer the company of the ambitious rather than the loyal. There was a warmth to his summons that stirred my curiosity. I showed the letter to Poirot, with whom I was dining that evening in our modest club. Poirot, who was arranging the cutlery with his customary geometrical precision, lifted his eyes and regarded me keenly. "Eh bien, mon ami," he said. "So you are invited to a house party in Sapa? A manor house, an occasion, a gathering of family and acquaintances. And where there is a gathering," he tapped one elegant finger against his nose, "there is always the possibility of drama." I laughed. "Surely you don't suggest that every country house conceals a crime?" Poirot leaned back, his small figure neat and compact as a camel. "Not every house, Hastings. But I, Hercule Poirot, have observed one thing. Where the human passions assemble under one roof, they cease, they ferment, they explode, and then it is the little gray cells that must restore order." It struck me then that he had grown restless of late. London life, without the spice of a taste, wearied him. "You might accompany me," I suggested lightly. "Charles did say the house would be full of company. I am sure Sir Alistair would not begrudge an additional guest." Poirot's mustaches quivered. "To intrude uninvited? No, Hastings. It is not my way." Then, after a moment, "And yet, who knows? Perhaps fate will find the invitation for me." I did not press him further, and indeed, 3 days later, when I received a second note from Charles, this time warmly including Monsieur Poirot, having learned from some mutual acquaintance that I now shared my life with a celebrated detective, I felt a small thrill of satisfaction. Poirot, I noticed, received the news with only a faint smile, as though he had anticipated it all along. We journeyed by train to the county of Hampshire, and thence by motor car through rolling lanes bordered with autumnal trees until at last we came in sight of Rosewood Manor. It was an imposing house of red brick, softened by ivy, with tall chimneys and mullioned windows that caught the late sun. A sweep of gravel drive led us up to its entrance, where the door stood open in hospitable welcome. On the steps we were greeted by Charles himself. Time had added a certain heaviness to his figure, but his face was still ruddy, his manner breezy, his handshake hearty. "Hastings, old man," he exclaimed, "and this must be Monsieur Poirot. We are honored indeed. Father will be quite beside himself. He reads of you in the papers, you know." Poirot bowed with continental grace. "It is I who am honored, Monsieur Greville." Inside, the hall was wide and oak-paneled, with ancestral portraits glowering from the walls. We were introduced in rapid succession to the rest of the household. First came Lady Evelyn Greville, tall and statuesque, her fair hair streaked with silver, her eyes cool as winter seas. She extended a pale hand, her smile faint and unrevealing. Then Miss Clara Greville, the orphan niece, scarcely more than 20, with a delicate face and nervous eyes that flickered anxiously from one guest to another. She seemed glad of my polite greeting, though she spoke little. Mr. Adrian Bellamy, the family solicitor, was already present, a thin gentleman of middle age with spectacles glinting upon his nose and a habit of pressing his lips together as though afraid of what they might disclose. And lastly, Dr. Margaret Phelps, cover irritation. Lady Evelyn's glances at her husband were cool, even disdainful. Clara seemed perpetually on the verge of tears. Bellamy responded to inquiries with evasions, and Dr. Phelps, she watched, she observed, and when she spoke, it was with a candor that struck flint against steel. Poirot, for his part, said little. He arranged his cutlery, adjusted his napkin, and directed his small, intent gaze about the table. Once I heard him murmur, "It is curious, Hastings, how much people reveal in the way they break bread." After dinner, we withdrew to the drawing room, where a storm began to mutter beyond the windows. Rain lashed the panes. Thunder rolled distantly. The lamps glowed warmly upon polished furniture and heavy curtains. We took our coffee while Sir Alistair discoursed on politics with his lawyer. Charles muttered about estate affairs, and the ladies conversed in subdued tones. At one point, Lady Evelyn rose, her silken gown whispering, and drifted to the window. Her profile was caught against the darkening sky, sharp and cold. Sir Alistair's eyes followed her with something between anger and contempt. "Marriage," Poirot whispered to me, "is the most dangerous of institutions. Remember that, Hastings." I confess I was startled. Yet before I could reply, Sir Alistair rose, announcing he had papers to attend to in his study. His tone was curt. He excused himself with only the briefest of nods to Lady Evelyn. She did not answer. The company slowly dispersed. Charles yawned and declared he must rise early. Clara slipped away with a nervous good night. Bellamy remained to smoke a pipe, while Dr. Phelps entertained Poirot with a discussion of medical records. At last, when we two retired, I glanced back down the corridor. A single door at the far end stood half closed. A light burned within. The shadow of Sir Alistair moved across the curtain, and the storm muttered ever closer, as though promising that before long, the peace of Rosewood Manor would be shattered. The storm had gathered force during the night, sweeping across the Hampshire countryside with a violence that rattled windows and shook the very timbers of Rosewood Manor. Lightning flared white against the blackness, and thunder rolled like distant artillery. I confess I lay awake longer than I should have, the rain drumming a steady tattoo against the glass of my chamber. It must have been near midnight when I dozed at last, though not soundly. A sudden peal, louder than the rest, startled me awake some time later. I fancied I heard movement in the corridor outside. Footsteps, hushed and deliberate. I debated whether to investigate, but the old soldier's caution warred with the guest's propriety, and I remained where I was. Presently the house settled once more into silence, and I returned to uneasy slumber. It was the butler Thomas who roused us at breakfast the next morning, his face ashen. He whispered something to Charles, who rose abruptly from the table, his napkin falling forgotten to the floor. "What is it?" Lady Evelyn demanded, her tone imperious. "It is father," Charles said hoarsely. "He has not come down. Thomas found the study locked this morning. He fears something is wrong." Poirot, who had been calmly buttering his toast, set down his knife with infinite precision. His little eyes gleamed. "Come, Hastings," he said softly. We followed Charles and Thomas along the corridor. A small group soon formed behind us. Lady Evelyn, Clara pale and trembling, Dr. Phelps grim with apprehension, and Bellamy muttering to himself. At the door of the study, Thomas paused, his hands shaking. "It is bolted from within, sir." "Have you tried knocking?" asked Poirot. Thomas nodded miserably. No answer. Charles struck the heavy oak with his fist. "Father, father, are you there?" His voice rang hollow in the silence. Poirot raised a hand. "Permit me." He tapped lightly, his ear close to the wood. Nothing. The rain outside had ceased, but the air hung thick with the aftermath of storm. "It will have to be forced," Charles declared. Bellamy cleared his throat. Perhaps the constabulary. But Poirot interrupted. "Not time. It is of the essence." His eyes flicked to the butler. "Fetch something stout, if you please." Within minutes, the door was burst open. We stumbled into the dimly lit room, the curtains still drawn, the air heavy with smoke from the cold hearth. And there, slumped in a high-backed chair at a great mahogany desk, sat Sir Alistair Greeley. His head had fallen sideways. A revolver dangled from his right hand. Upon his temple, a dark round gaze. Clara gave a choked cry. Lady Evelyn stood rigid, her face drained of stepped delicately about the room, his patent leather shoes making no sound on the carpet. He bent over the desk, examined the pistol, glanced at the brandy glass half-drained beside it, then turned to the fireplace, where a heap of ashes smoldered faintly. "Tiens," he murmured. "Curious. What is curious?" I asked, unable to restrain myself. Poirot pointed with precision. "Observe. Hastings. The revolver lies loosely in the right hand, yet the wound is high on the left temple. That is, how do you say? Inconvenient. You mean, I mean, said Poirot gravely, that Sir Alistair Greville has not died by his own hand." There was a collective gasp. Lady Evelyn swayed. Clara clutched the edge of the desk. "But then, murder," whispered Charles. Poirot's mustaches bristled. "Exactly so." Dr. Phelps looked troubled. "It is possible, I suppose. But the door, locked, bolted on the inside. How could any intruder escape?" "That, madam," Poirot replied with composure, "is the question we shall answer." The room was soon alive with activity. Thomas was dispatched to summon the local police, and Inspector Graves arrived within the hour, a large, ruddy-faced man with a hearty manner ill-suited to the somber atmosphere. "Well, well," he said, surveying the body. "Looks like suicide to me. Common enough when a man's been under strain. What do you say, Doctor?" Dr. Phelps hesitated. "I would not have been surprised, Inspector. He was lately much troubled with his health, both physical and mental." Poirot's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. Instead, he examined the desk with fastidious care. He lifted the brandy glass with a handkerchief, sniffed, then replaced it. He studied the papers scattered across the blotter, the pen falling to one side, and the faint impression of writing upon the top sheet. Finally, he turned to the window. It was fastened. The curtains bore the scent of damp roses. One bloom, I observed, lay broken upon the sill. Poirot stooped, picked it up delicately, and placed it in his pocket. Inspector Graves, meanwhile, was already satisfied. "Clear case, if you ask me," he declared. "Gentleman locks himself in, shoots himself, end of story. Sad business, but straightforward." Poirot coughed. "Pardon, Inspector, but nothing in life, or in death, is ever so straightforward." Graves bristled. "You mean to say—" "I mean," said Poirot evenly, "that until every detail is explained, every little detail, we may not assume. Assumption is the mother of error." He turned to Charles. "Tell me, monsieur, at what hour did you last see your father alive?" Charles frowned. "After dinner, I think. Around 10 o'clock. He excused himself to work in here. And you heard nothing in the night?" "Nothing. Only the storm." Poirot nodded slowly, his eyes darting to each face in turn. "And you, madam?" Lady Evelyn's reply was calm, yet I thought her voice slightly strained. "I retired early. I heard thunder, but nothing else." Clara whispered that she had not slept at all, but had heard no unusual sounds. Bellamy declared he had sat up late with correspondence in his room. Dr. Phelps added that she, too, had retired after conversing with Poirot in the drawing room. One by one, their alibis emerged, thin and uncertain as smoke. Poirot listened without comment, his head inclined, his fingertips pressed together. At last Inspector Graves clapped his hands decisively. "Well then, I shall have the body removed and the verdict noted. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll not trouble you further." But Poirot's voice cut sharply across the room. "One moment, if you please." He pointed to the mantel clock. "Why is it, Inspector, that the hands of this clock stand at 10 minutes past 11, when all other timepieces in the house agree upon the hour of 8? Graves blinked. "Stop, I suppose." "Nothing." Poirot shook his head slowly. "No, Inspector, not stop." A silence fell, heavy as the storm-laden air. Poirot's eyes gleamed with inner fire. "Mark me well, Mesdames Petits Messieurs. misfortune with an air of stubborn ceremony. Rosewood Manor did not wail or tear its draperies. It merely drew its crimson curtains closer, dimmed its lamps by a degree, and received grief as it would a guest of breeding, without surprise, and with gloomy accommodation. Inspector Graves, having first blustered and then, under the unyielding politeness of Poirot, grown more circumspect, gave orders in a voice that was almost apologetic. The constables he had brought from the village took up quiet posts at doorways and at the foot of the great stair. The study itself he marked off with a coil of string and two damp, "Do not cross" placards appropriated from his motor car. They sagged mournfully in the heavy air. "No one in or out due here," he told Thomas. "The house is to be sealed until I say otherwise." Thomas, the butler, bowed. His face had grown grayer with each passing hour, the hollows under his eyes like thumbprints pressed by despair. "Very good, sir." Graves turned to Poirot with a grudging courtesy. "I'll ask for your cooperation, Mr. Poirot. Use your reputation. I've my duty. If we work together, we'll not tread upon each other's toes." "My dear Inspector," said Poirot, "I am the most delicate dancer." He inclined his head. "We shall go and measure. You will conduct your inquiry, and if haphazard I perceive a small trifle, an overlooked thread, I will present it to you with all the grace at my command." "Very well," said Graves, not entirely sure if he had been flattered or warned. It was arranged, then, that the household should be gathered in the long gallery while their statements were taken. The gallery, with its black and white tiled floor and a procession of Greenville ancestors glowering in oil, possessed an atmosphere of judgment. People feel their lineage upon them in such rooms. It presses like a hand upon the shoulder. I took a chair near the windows, from which the park spread in a sodden sweep. The storm had exhausted itself. Leaves lay plastered to the drive. The flower beds were pocked with rain. A broken bough of the great plane tree had fallen close to the terrace door, its twigs dotted with bright scarlet hits. The world had the scrubbed foot of a child who had wept itself quiet. Lady Evelyn arrived first, a figure of frozen composure. She wore black silk now, and a slender chain of seed pearls. Not a hair was out of place. She sat where a shaft of pale daylight fell upon her face and folded her white hands in her lap. They were very steady. Charles followed, color mottled in his cheeks, his jaw set with a masculine resolution I found a trifle theatrical. He strode up and down with military energy. He had not served, as I had, yet he assumed the air of a commandant in distress. Clara hovered behind him, all flutter and hush, like a small bird startled into a winter garden. Bellamy, the solicitor, came last among the family circle, after a murmur with the constable at the door. His spectacles misty. Dr. Margaret Phelps stood apart at the mantel, as though she were a portrait come out of its frame for an airing. Her still gaze weighed the room and found it wanting. Inspector Graves established his small table and ledger at the center. "We shall proceed simply," he said. "Statements of your movements between dinner and this morning at 8 o'clock. Any unusual sights or sounds. Any keys, weapons, papers, and so on. The servants will be examined afterward." Poirot, who had procured for himself a chair with arms, sat a little to one side, his knees together, his hands laid accurately palm to palm. He looked as though he might be listening to a lecture in which he had little interest, but which he intended to pass with a top mark. Graves began with Charles. "After dinner," said Charles, "my father left the drawing room. It would be about 10 o'clock, as we had coffee there at 1:30. I spoke to Mr. Bellamy, the state matters, and then retired before 11. I confess I slept ill. The storm, you know. I heard thunder once about, well, I suppose near midnight. Nothing else." Bellamy corroborated the brief talk. "We discussed the timber lease. Only 10 minutes. Sir Alistair had asked me for a note summarizing certain clauses. I had drafted it earlier. I did not see him again." "Did Sir Alistair expect you later?" "Not last night," said Bellamy, pressing his lips. "We were to meet this morning. He halted, and his mouth compressed. "We were to meet. Where precisely?" said Poirot very low. "In his study," Bellamy answered after the briefest pause. "You retired directly after." Graves One moment, madam, murmured Poirot. You say you remain in the drawing room until 10:20? Are you precise? As precise as any person may be without a chronometer at her wrist, Lady Evelyn replied. The clock upon the mantel then showed 20 minutes past 10. Poirot closed his eyes as if in prayer. He opened them to the inspector. You perceive, Graves, we gather a small bouquet at the times. It will become a very pretty nosegay. Dr. Phelps's statement possessed a frankness that seemed to irritate the inspector and amuse Poirot. Sir Alistair had been, shall we say, volatile, she said. I had advised reduced stimulants. He smiled at me and poured himself a brandy after dinner in the teeth of my counsel. I took coffee with Lady Evelyn and retired at 10:25. I keep no watch in the evenings. I tie myself by a habit. I wind the little traveling clock on my writing table when I remove my brooch. It was still unwound when Thomas knocked at 8:45 this morning. That is all. And Miss Clara's hands pleated her handkerchief until I feared it would be torn in two. I left the drawing room very soon after Sir Alistair, she whispered. I had a headache. I think it was around 10 o'clock. I went directly to my room. I read a little by the fire and then lay awake. The thunder. I dislike storms. Did you hear your uncle in the study? Poirot asked gently. She lifted her eyes to him with a look like confidence painfully won. No, Monsieur Poirot. But he stopped. But, said Graves impatiently. I thought I heard voices, she murmured, somewhere along the corridor after 11. Low voices. I did not know whose. Then, nothing. Voices, plural, Poirot repeated. Merci, mademoiselle. When it came to the servants, the house unfolded its offering. Thomas had last seen Sir Alistair at 5 minutes past 10, crossing the hall toward the study. Mrs. Paget, the cook, the very embodiment of English roast beef, cheeks aflame with a permanent kitchen glow, swore that she had never heard a thing, not with that sad boiler hammering in the ceiling. Elsie, the upstairs maid, had taken hot water to Lady Evelyn at 10:35 and to Miss Clara at 5 to 11. She had then returned to the scullery, where she remained until Mrs. Paget dismissed her. Neither she nor the under-gardener, who had slept on a pallet in the boot room after securing the greenhouse windows, had seen anyone in the corridors after 11. Graves closed his ledger with decision. There you are. No one heard a shot. The door is bolted from within. The revolver in the hand. He looked sideways at Poirot. You suggested otherwise this morning. Poirot made a small teetering motion with his hand, as if balancing the scale. I suggest nothing that I have not seen with my eyes. Permit, Inspector, that I make a promenade. Graves, with a grunt of ill grace cloaked as civility, led the way. We went first to the study. A constable lifted the string for us and stood aside. The room possessed the stillness of a theater between acts. The desk remained as we had left it, save that the body had been removed. A square of the carpet beneath the chair darkened where life had gone out. Poirot did not go immediately to the desk. Poirot touched it and sniffed delicately. Garden low, recent, and the curtain. He drew it back. The faint perfume of roses breathed out, the ghost of yesterday's bouquet. Upon the hem of the brocade hung a small thorn, scarcely larger than a pin's head. "For me," said Poirot in a tone of innocent ecstasy. "How adorable are the details!" He produced from his pocket the broken rose he had lifted that morning. There is always the little romance of a flower. See how the stem is broken not by a clumsy hand, but by a careful one that wished to snap it, to place it, a hand that arranges. Graves snorted faintly. "Wives often arrange flowers, Mr. Poirot." "Mais oui, wives do many things." We examined next the door. The inner bolt had been shot home when we found the body. The wood around it showed the bruises of our forces. Poirot bent to the carpet near the threshold. "There is here a small crumb of something recent. You will indulge me." He scooped the speck upon a visiting card and held it to his nose. Fine, without scent, like that used for cloths or for, how do you say, the sewing machine. And upon the bolt, yes, look, there at the nose, a shade of the same. He turned, eyes alight. If one wished the bolt to move with decorum, without a squeak, one would thus anoint it. Why? For the pleasure of quiet, or because one must bolt the door from without, and does not wish the sound to betray the intolerant. Graves shifted his feet. From without. Now you're away with fairies. Poirot's voice was as bland as clotted cream. "We shall see." He had Thomas bring a large keyring from a drawer in the hall table. "The masterpiece, sir," said Thomas, his voice hoarse. And from this Poirot selected a long old-fashioned key with a bit carved in the shape of 3 teeth. He offered it to the inspector. "You observe the keyhole of the study door bears the marks of frequent use, yes? And yet this key, Thomas, has not been polished by use lately. See the dullness of the dust in the wood. The study key never leaves Sir Alistair's pocket, sir," Thomas said. "That was his habit. When he came home from London, he would lay his keys upon the tray, but the study key he kept." "Ah," said Poirot. "Then where is it now?" The question hung in the room like the sourness after spilt wine. We looked at one another. Lady Evelyn's hands folded a degree tighter. Bellamy's spectacles slid a fraction down his nose. Charles colored, then paled. "I will have the valet search his clothing," said Graves. "Do so," Poirot murmured. "And, while we are domestic, let us make the map. It is the map, you know, that is the great friend of order." We traced the corridor. The study occupied, as I have said, the far western end, overlooking the terrace and the plane trees. Next came a small anteroom fitted with a washstand and 2 chairs, a convenience from an earlier century. Opposite it stood a locked cabinet room where Sir Alistair kept the plate on nights of large entertainments. Thomas produced the key, and we established it in order. Beyond lay the passage to the stair, and, around the angle, the south corridor where the bedrooms opened. First Bellamy's chamber, then a small room used by Dr. Phelps as a surgery when she attended Sir Alistair, then Miss Clara's room, then Lady Evelyn's apartments. Last, at the end, a door to the little balcony above the garden, rarely used. To be shut thus, Poirot observed, is very comfortable for a murderer who has planned it. If any came or went along this corridor after 11, there were not many to observe. We heard, that no one did. Poirot looked fondly at him. We have heard that no one admits to it. On the way back to the gallery, he paused abruptly, crouched with unexpected agility, and retrieved from the baseboard a small bright object. "A pin," I said, peering. "A hat pin," corrected Poirot, holding it at arm's length. Its head was a tiny dome of jet, not quite modern in fashion, and not from the cheap shop. It has bent a little and scratched here. See, the tiniest bird. It has been used. Not in the hat. He directed his gaze at the study door with its robust keyhole, and then at the pin again. "Mais non, we will not be vulgar and dense. We will keep it, we will think." Back in the gallery, the family had ranged themselves in attitudes of endurance. Something had altered indefinably in the relation of each to the other. Their circle had tightened. They did not so much look at one another as "Now, Inspector," said Poirot at last, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his cuff, "you will perform for me a little service. You will ask of Mr. Bellamy a copy of Sir Alister's present will, and you will learn from him, with all courtesy, whether a draft of a codicil exists. You will ask also of Lady Evelyn the whereabouts of a certain blue sealing-wax. If she possesses it, I shall be pleased to be told. And from all the servants you will inquire if anyone, for a reason innocent or otherwise, borrowed oil for the mending of a machine or a clock. And you will search, yes, you will search, every pocket of every garment worn last evening by those who had the freedom of the West Corridor. I recommend the pockets very strongly." Graves bristled, but he made his notes. "And you, Mr. Poirot, what will you do?" Poirot stood, light twinkling at the corner of his eye. "I, my good inspector, shall tell what I do always. I shall sit, I shall arrange, I shall think." He tapped his temple with an impediment-like finger. "The little grey cells, they will make the promenade." He did not, however, sit at once. He crossed to Lady Evelyn and bowed. "Madam, you will forgive me. One question, purely domestic. The roses in the study, were they from the south bed?" Her head lifted a fraction. "From the east border," she said, a shade too quickly. "I cut them yesterday morning." The east border. How charming. He turned to Clara with a gentleness that made her blink. "Mademoiselle, you have delicate nerves. You read last night too quietly. Might one ask, what book?" She colored painfully. "Poetry. Tennyson." Then the mark one finds at page 47 is yours, and the ash upon the hearthrug will find. Her eyes widened. "Yes, how did you?" Poirot allowed himself an almost invisible smile. "Because, you see, mademoiselle, order is a habit like any other. When it is broken, it leaves a noise in the air." It was near luncheon then, though no one desired food. The house reverberated with subdued movements, the creak of a stair, the closing of a door, the ghostly rattle of crockery from far away. Poirot and I repaired, at last, to a small morning room off the gallery, where the scent of beeswax and lavender persisted like faithful retainers. "Well, Hastings," he said, when Thomas had left us with tea, he knew we should not drink, "you are impatient that I play with hatpins and roses when there is the big question of the bolt. Is it not so?" "I own," I said, "the bolt puzzles me. Also the clock stopped at 11:10. Also the missing key. Also, well, everything." Poirot placed the hatpin upon the saucer as one might lay a dagger upon a cushion. "They are not separate things, mon ami. They are one. Consider, a man sits to write a codicil. He intends to burn a paper. Perhaps he does burn it, but the wax is not of his own drawer. Well, a door is found bolted. The bolt moves as if recently oiled. Well, a clock points to a false hour. A flower is broken and posed. A scent of roses lies in a room where no vase stands. Why? Because the murderer arranged it all," I burst out. "To mimic suicide, to falsify time, to dramatize," said Poirot softly. "There, Hastings, is the key. The crime is not only committed, it is staged. It is done by one who understands the eye of the beholder, and who, alas, is too proud of composition. His mustache is tilted. Vanity, you remember, is always the scene." He rose, as if upon a string. "Come, we will make, as the English say, a nuisance of ourselves at the servants' hall. There is often in the small people the great clarity, and I desire very much to know who filled the oil-can lamps." As we stepped into the gallery once more, we encountered Bellamy coming the other way, a slim sheaf of papers in his hand. He started, attempted to pass, then hesitated. Poirot's gaze dropped to the papers, rose, and fixed upon Bellamy's face with a mildness that could have polished marble. "You have been so amiable, Monsieur Bellamy, as to prepare for the inspector a copy of the will. The staring ancestors, and the assistance of these gentlemen who never speak. What do you want first? I asked. He drew a long breath through his nose, theatrical as a gourmand considering the cart. First, I want the blue wax. Second, I want the oil can. Third, his voice dropped. Third, I want the missing key. When I have those, I shall ask for one thing more. Not an object, but a soul in disorder. Whose? Poirot smiled at me with that almost affectionate exasperation I knew too well. Mays, Hastings. If I tell you everything at once, what will you write in chapter 9? He went forward, a precise, compact figure against the long perspective of the gallery, and as I followed, a small draft moved in the corridor, stirring the hem of the curtain to reveal, no more than for a heartbeat, the tiniest spangle of blue caught in the nap of the carpet, like a star fallen out of its heavens. Poirot, I said sharply. There. I see it, he answered, without slackening his measured step. We shall not pick it up yet. It is sometimes excellent for the fish that the bait remains upon the water. And so the house was shut, the players were in their places, and we, with our little gray cells, took our seats in the stalls, the curtain not yet lifted, the orchestra softly tuning the notes of tragedy. The next day dawned still and gray, as though the storm had spent not only its own fury, but that of the house as well. A hush lay over Rosewood Manor, a hush not of peace, but of restraint, like the drawn breath before a verdict is delivered. Servants padded noiselessly along corridor, curtains remained half drawn, the clink of china at breakfast sounded sacrilegious. Poirot, I noticed, was in excellent spirits. He had polished his mustaches to a state of perfection, chosen a suit of pale gray, and looked about him with that bright, bird-like attentiveness which always meant his mind was alive with feeling. You are cheerful enough, I remarked, rather irritable. For myself, I had not slept well. The image of Sir Alistair, slumped lifeless at his desk, haunted me still. But yet, more haunting. Poirot beamed at me. It is when death walks in his melodramatic shoes that Hercule Poirot becomes invigorating. One must observe, one must question, one must arrange. It is like setting pieces upon the chessboard. And already, I suspect, the endgame is visible. I stared. Already? But you have scarcely begun. Poirot tapped a forefinger against his temple. Here, Hastings, the case proceeds far. Outwardly, it has not yet begun. That you shall see this morning. Inspector Graves had grudgingly allowed Poirot some liberty, though it was clear he still leaned towards the verdict of suicide. Nevertheless, he consented to our undertaking the first round of questioning. The family gathered once more in the long gallery, looking more haggard than the day before. Lady Evelyn was icily composed, her gown of dark velvet lending her the appearance of a marble effigy. Charles paced by the window, his restlessness unchecked. Clara perched miserably on the edge of a chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles showed white. Bellamy stood aloof, spectacles flashing as he cleaned them for the 10th time. Dr. Phelps, calm and practical, alone met the proceedings with a sort of professional resignation. Poirot advanced to the center of the room and inclined his head. Mesdames et messieurs, you will forgive me. I am a foreigner, a guest, and yet I intrude with my questions. But it is necessary, for justice, for truth, and also, I think, for peace. His voice, gentle yet insistent, carried a subtle authority. No one protested. Lady Evelyn. Poirot began with Lady Evelyn. Madam, your husband, he was a man of great force and pride. Between you, was there harmony? Her lips curved faintly. Harmony, Monsieur Poirot, is a matter of perspective. Sir Alistair and I understood one another, if not always happily. We occupied the same house, the same duties, the same name. That was sufficient. You did not love him. A flicker crossed her eyes. Love, Monsieur Poirot, is a word for novice. At my age, one speaks of responsibility. Poirot inclined his head, unperturbed. And yet, yesterday evening, did you not follow him with your glance when he left the drawing room? There was anger, perhaps. Her chin lifted. Sir Alistair and I had long ceased to quarrel. It is a waste of energy to quarrel when contempt suffices. There was a stir among the others. Poirot merely bowed. Merci, madam. Charles breathed a Why do you suggest otherwise? Poirot's smile was faint, because on the blotter of his desk was written the word codicil. The color drained from Charles's face. Then he meant to change something, but why? What? He broke off, agitation shaking him. Poirot watched him narrowly. That is what we must discover. Clara Greville. Next Poirot addressed Clara, his tone softening. Mademoiselle, you have been much distressed. Courage. Tell me again. You heard voices in the corridor. She nodded. Yes. Low, urgent. But the storm was loud. I could not distinguish words. I thought one voice might have been my uncle's. The other, I cannot be sure. You do not think it was your cousin's? Poirot asked, glancing at Charles. Her eyes widened in horror. No. Oh no, I am certain it was not Charles. Poirot leaned forward. And besides, you are certain. She hesitated. I had read nearly 20 pages. Perhaps half an hour had passed since I went up. That would make it near 11. Poirot nodded slowly. That is most interesting. Adrian Bellamy. The lawyer came next. Monsieur Bellamy, Poirot began. You are precise by profession. Tell me, at what hour did you retire? Close upon 11, Bellamy replied. I had left Charles a little after 10:15. I returned to my room, worked on correspondence, and extinguished my light at midnight. You did not see Sir Alistair again? No. Poirot's eyes shone. You are certain? Not even in the corridor, near his study? Bellamy stiffened. I said no, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot smiled. Perhaps. Or perhaps the shooting was at another hour altogether. He stooped suddenly, picking up a twig of rose blowing from the east border. He examined it, sniffed, and tucked it into his pocket beside the broken bloom from the study. The roses, Hastings, they are like the chorus in a Greek tragedy. They observe. They comment. They tell the truth. If only one listens. That evening, as the household dispersed under Inspector Graves' orders, Poirot leaned close to me. His eyes shone with suppressed fire. Mon honor, he murmured. The murderer has already betrayed himself or herself, but we must be patient. Tomorrow, we shall prod a little more. And soon, bientôt, the mask will fall. I shivered. For the first time I felt, with dreadful clarity, that beneath the courteous surfaces of Rosewood Manor lurked something venomous, waiting to strike again. The storm had passed, yet its echoes lingered within Rosewood Manor. The air was heavy with mistrust, the corridors whispered with unspoken accusations. It seemed to me that the very portraits upon the walls leaned forward to listen, their painted lips curved in disdain at the weaknesses of their descendants. Inspector Graves, for his part, had resolved upon a course. That morning, he summoned Charles to the library and confronted him with an air of robust confidence. Poirot and I were present, for Graves, though distrustful of Poirot's methods, had come to realize that the little Belgian's presence lent weight to proceedings. Charles stood tall, defiant, though lines of fatigue were etched upon his face. His voice, when he spoke, carried a note of suppressed anger. What is the meaning of this, Inspector? You send for me as though I were some common fellow. Graves slapped the table with his hand. Meaning's plain enough, Mr. Greville. Your father dead in his locked study. A codicil rumor. Motive enough for the heir who feared he might be disinherited. Charles flushed crimson. That is outrageous. I had no idea of any codicil. Poirot intervened softly. same distinctive wear at the heel. Those prints were made after the storm, when the earth was wettest. So then, monsieur, you were abroad. Not at 11, but later. A silence fell. Charles swallowed hard. Yes, I did go out, but it was only for air. The storm oppressed me. I walked to the terrace, no further. Graves pounced. The terrace, by your father's study window? Charles stammered. I suppose so, but I did not go in. I swear it. Poirot regarded him gravely. Why conceal it, then? Charles's shoulders sagged. Because it looked bad. And you know how gossip grows in such a house. I thought, better to say nothing. To me, his words rang sincere. Yet Poirot's expression remained inscrutable. The day brought further revelations. Thomas the butler, questioned again, admitted he had overheard raised voices between Sir Alistair and Charles on the morning preceding the death. They was quarreling, sir, Thomas said reluctantly, about money. Sir Alistair said as how he had enough. Mr. Charles answered hard, very hard, something about his rights, and how the old ways couldn't last forever. Then Sir Alistair dismissed him sharply. Graves nodded in satisfaction. There you are. Quarrel with the father, debts mounting, out near the study at midnight. Looks ugly, Mr. Poirot. Even I, loyal to Charles as my old school friend, felt the case against him thickening like storm clouds. Yet Poirot, though attentive, shook his head. It is all too convenient, Inspector. Too clear, too obvious. Life, she is not like that. A murderer does not place himself in the spotlight so obligingly. Graves snorted. We will see. That evening, Poirot and I sat in a small morning room. A fire glowed faintly, its embers throwing shifting shadows across the carpet. I could not contain my feelings. Poirot, I burst out, you cannot deny the evidence. Charles quarreled with his father, at death, was out near the study that night. It translated guilt. Poirot wagged a finger. Hastings, toujours vous allez trop vite. Yes, he quarreled. Yes, he had death. Yes, he lied about the terrace. Think. The pistol was placed in the right hand, though the wound was on the left. The clock was set to deceive. The roses, the missing key. Do these things speak of Charles? None. They speak of someone subtle, someone theatrical. Charles is hot-headed, impetuous. He is not subtle. But then why lie? I asked stubbornly. Because, Poirot said with a small shrug, the English gentleman, he fears scandal more than crime. He lies to protect his dignity, not because he is guilty. Mark that well, Hastings. It is psychology. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Besides, Charles is too obvious. In a play, when all fingers point to one man in the first act, it is never he who proves the villain in the last. Remember that. Later that night, Poirot made a quiet inspection of Charles's room. With Charles's reluctant permission, for by now even he realized resistance would be futile, Poirot examined drawers, boots, and writing desk. He discovered several unpaid bills, a letter from a creditor threatening action, and a half-written appeal to Sir Alistair for funds. Nothing, however, that pointed directly to violence. More curious was Poirot's interest in the boots. He measured them against his notebook sketches of the terrace prints, muttering to himself all the while. Then he polished his mustaches, satisfied. They are the same boots, yes, he said at last. But the depth of the impression, too deep for one merely strolling. He carried a weight, Hastings, a heavy weight. You mean, perhaps a body, perhaps not. We shall see. I confess I shivered. The following morning, Inspector Graves returned from town, triumphant. "We've found more," he declared, "at the bank." Sir Alistair had spoken openly of altering his will. He meant to reduce Charles's inheritance considerably. There's motive enough. Charles, confronted with this, grew white. So he meant to ruin me, he said coldly. All the same, I did not kill him. Poirot studied him intently, then turned away without comment. When at last we were alone, I could bear it no longer. "Poirot," I said, "are you defending Charles out of perversity? The police are convinced. The evidence long after midnight, troubled by shadows and echoes. Somewhere in the house a door creaked. Footsteps moved stealthily along the corridor. For a moment I imagined Charles again, pacing in agitation. But Poirot's words echoed louder. Too obvious, too neat, and I realized that at Rosewood Manor, danger lay not where it appeared, but where it hid. The morning broke bleak and cold, though the rain had ceased. Rosewood Manor seemed to draw itself inward, shutters closed against the damp, as though the house too felt the shadow of death. Inspector Graves had returned to his duties in town, promising to come back in 2 days with further evidence. The household remained confined at Poirot's insistence, though the inspector had scoffed at such foreign notions. Poirot, however, was relentless. No one departs, he had said firmly, until the little gray cells are satisfied. And so, resentfully or resignedly, the family endured. It was mid-morning when Poirot beckoned me to join him in the study. The room had been left much as before. The heavy desk, the cold hearth, the curtains drawn against the panel light. A faint odor of stale brandy and extinguished candle persisted, mingling with something sharper, a trace of perfume. Poirot tiptoed to the writing table with a fastidious air. "Regard Hastings," he said softly. "It is here, the little detail that betrays." I leaned over his shoulder. The desk was strewn with papers, but Poirot's attention was fixed upon the blotter. I had seen it before, with its faint impression of the word codicil. "Yes, yes," I said impatiently. "We saw that already." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "But did you notice the alignment?" "The alignment?" He lifted the sheet of blotting paper carefully and placed it back upon the pad. "Observe, mon homme, the writing runs at a slant, yes, as though the paper upon which it was written lay crosswise upon the desk. But here, see, Sir Alistair's inkwell stands at the right, his pen rests at the right also. He wrote always, as his letters show, with the paper square. This impression is not his." I blinked. "You mean, someone else used his blotter?" "Precisely. Someone who leaned across, who wrote hurriedly, who did not think to remove the impression. It is like a shadow of guilt left behind. But then, this codicil, it was forged." Poirot tapped his temple. "Not forged, Hastings. Perhaps prepared, perhaps destroyed. But not in his hand. That is certain." Poirot next turned to the hearth. Kneeling delicately, he sifted the ashes with a silver paper knife. "Note, my friend, the remains of sealing wax. Blue, as we saw yesterday. And here, tiny clippings, scorched, but not wholly gone." He retrieved a fragment, no larger than a postage stamp. "Part of a margin. And see the texture, thick, not ordinary foolscap. Parchment paper, used for documents of weight. A will, perhaps, or a codicil." He examined the great minutely, his fingers precise as a surgeon's. The paper was folded, sealed, burnt, yet not by Sir Alistair. His seals, they are red, and his habit, it was to tear before burning, not to seal. I stared at him. Then someone else destroyed it. Someone with access, someone who feared what it contained. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Exactly. But it was the roses that most engaged his attention. On the sill still lay petals, brown-edged in the heat of the room. Poirot laid the broken bloom he had pocketed earlier beside him. "You observe, Hastings, the stem? It was snapped clean, with a twist, not cut by scissors." "Why?" "Because scissors, they leave no drama. A snapped rose, placed carelessly, suggests a lover's quarrel, a gesture of passion. It is theatrical, no. Then the murderer staged even the flowers." Poirot smiled. "But of course, it is a stage, this study, a play set for our eyes. Every detail, the pistol in the wrong hand, the clock, the gold coin, the rose, all are designed to create an impression. But impressions, Hastings, they are like smoke, pretty but insubstantial. Beneath them lies the solid fact. And what is the fact? I demanded." Poirot straightened, dusting his fingers. "That Sir Alistair did not die at midnight, as the clock suggests, but earlier." I gasped. "Earlier? But everyone heard the storm, the thunder. Would not the shot have been heard then?" And that, Hastings, is the clue in detail. The voices, the false hour, the arranged stage, all point to murder most carefully contrived. That afternoon Poirot resumed his questioning. He summoned Lady Evelyn first. "Madam," he said politely, "you told us you retired at 10:20. You are precise, yes." She inclined her head. "I am." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Then tell me, how is it that your maid, Elsie, brought hot water to your chamber at 10:35? She swore to the time. If you had retired already, why was she admitted then?" A flicker passed over Lady Evelyn's face. "I was in my dressing room. She brought the water as usual. There is no contradiction." "No contradiction, perhaps. Yet it troubles me. You see, the difference between 10:20 and 10:35 is small, but in a matter of death, it is large. Did you hear voices, madam, as you prepared for bed?" Her gaze grew frosty. "No, only the thunder." Poirot bowed. "Merci. That is all, for now." Charles came next, still resentful. Poirot regarded him benignly. "You admit, monsieur, you walked on the terrace near midnight. Did you pass the study window?" "Yes," Charles admitted sullenly. "It was dark, curtains drawn. I saw nothing. Did you notice the scent of roses?" He frowned. "Roses? Only the red." Poirot made a small note. "Curious. And yet, the roses in the room were fresh and strong. One who passed the window might have smelled them." Charles glared. "I cannot help what I did or did not smell." Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed. But sometimes, monsieur, it is the little things we notice, or fail to notice, that betray us." Dr. Phelps was questioned after dinner. Poirot asked, "Madam, you have been frank about Sir Alistair's health. Did he confide in you on the night of his death?" She hesitated. "We spoke briefly, yes. He complained of palpitations, of restlessness. I urged him to take a draught of his medicine. He brushed me off." "And did you see him again after 10 o'clock?" No, her answer was swift, perhaps too swift. Poirot's eyes softened. "Madam, you cared for him once. I see it. But affection may be twisted into bitterness, may it not?" She drew herself up. "I am a physician. I cared for him as a patient, nothing more." "Mais oui," nodded Poirot. "And yet, there is the perfume." Her eyes flashed. "Perfume? Forgive me. A faint scent lingers still in the study. Not roses, not brandy. A perfume, delicate, elusive. I think it is yours." She paled. "That is absurd. I wear no scent." Poirot bowed. "Then perhaps my senses deceive me. But I do not think so." Later, as we sat alone, I burst out, "Poirot, you believe Dr. Phelps was in the study that night?" Poirot's mustaches twitched. "I believe she was near it. Perhaps before the crime, perhaps after. But she denied too quickly. And denial, Hastings, is like a door slammed. One must ask, why was it slammed? Then she is the murderer." Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience, mon ami. There are still lies to uncover. But remember this detail. The blotter, the roses, the perfume. These are the whispers that lead us forward." He leaned back, eyes gleaming. "The murderer has laid out the stage. But the stage, it is like a child's toy theater. With a touch, it falls. That night, as I retired to my chamber, I felt the tension of the house like a taut string ready to snap. Every creak, every gust of wind, set my nerves on edge. And in my mind, I saw again the study, the pistol, the false clock, the roses. Poirot's words echoed, the little detail that betrays. I could not shake the feeling that the smallest of details, unnoticed by all save Poirot, would indeed bring the murderer into the light. The atmosphere at Rosewood Manor grew heavier with each passing day, as though the very walls had absorbed deceit and exhaled it in every corridor. Meals were subdued affairs, conversation halting and brittle. A certain sharpness clung to the air. Glances were exchanged too swiftly, voices sharpened at trivial remarks. Even eyes, less sensitive than Poirot to the currents of human psychology, could sense the strain. Poirot, however, flourished like a plant in facade. I found her alone in the small music room, a sheet of paper clutched in her hand, her eyes red from weeping. She started when she saw me, and attempted to hide the paper, but Poirot had entered behind me without sound. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "do not distress yourself. You are among friends." Clara faltered. "It is nothing, Monsieur Poirot. Only a letter." His tone was mild, yet his gaze sharp. "From a friend." Her hands trembled. "From Mr. Hugh Morton. He is a neighbor. We hoped, but my uncle disapproved. He forbade me even to correspond. He said the Mortons were beneath us. And yet he wrote." Yes. Her eyes filled with tears. "Hugh sent letters secretly. I kept them hidden. My uncle must never know." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet, mademoiselle, I think Sir Alistair did know. He was a man to discover such secrets. No." Clara's face paled. "You think he was angry with me? But I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I never meant to deceive. It was only that—" She broke off, burying her face in her hands. Poirot laid a hand gently on her shoulder. "Courage. Love, it is not a crime. But concealment, that is another matter. It places one where one may be misunderstood." Later, Poirot confided to me, if Sir Alistair discovered the letters, perhaps he meant to alter his will, to cut her off, to punish her, and that Hastings gives to the gentle Clara a motive most strong. I was astonished. "But surely, Clara, she could never—" Poirot shrugged. "One never knows, mon ami. A cornered bird, it may peck." The next revelation concerned Adrian Bellamy, the solicitor. Poirot, having obtained permission from Inspector Graves, had telephoned discreet inquiries to London. That afternoon a letter arrived by a special messenger. Poirot read it with lifted brows and a satisfied smile. So the prudent Monsieur Bellamy, he has been included. The letter reveals that Bellamy's private account had been entangled with speculative ventures. Losses mounted, and rumors of professional misconduct had begun to circulate quietly in the city. Poirot wasted no time. He confronted Bellamy in the library, with myself as a reluctant witness. "Monsieur," said Poirot, "you are a man of affairs, but sometimes the affairs, they are not so solid as they appear. Bellamy stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Sir Alistair, he was a man of keen eye. If he suspected mismanagement of his fortune, he might wish to alter his will, to remove you from its executorship, perhaps to demand restitution." Bellamy's face turned ashen. "You cannot prove—" "I do not seek to prove," Poirot interrupted softly. "I seek to understand. And I understand this. You had a very great deal to lose, should Sir Alistair live long enough to expose you." Bellamy's hands clenched upon his papers. "You go too far, Monsieur Poirot. I served Sir Alistair faithfully for 20 years. Poirot inclined his head. "Perhaps. But the truth, it has a way of surfacing, like oil upon water." When Bellamy had gone, Poirot murmured, "Another motive, Hastings. Do you see? The circle closes." That evening brought still more. Poirot had spoken privately with Elsie, the upstairs maid. She revealed, with the eager relish of one who knows her words carry weight, that Lady Evelyn received letters from London, delivered by a private messenger, and that she always burned them immediately in the small grate of her boudoir. Poirot's eyes had narrowed. "Describe these letters." "Thick paper, sir. Expensive. And a foreign stamp once, I noticed." Her ladyship said nothing, only burned them quick. Poirot turned this information over with visible relish. That night, as we sat before the fire, he explained, "Lady Evelyn, Hastings, has her secrets also. A correspondence, clandestine, perhaps a friendship, perhaps an affair. But in such matters, there is always danger. Sir Alistair, proud and vindictive, may have discovered it, and if he meant to disinherit her, that would provide motive most urgent." I exclaimed, "You think Lady Evelyn had a lover?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I think she had a correspondent. The lover, we shall see. But note this, her disdain for her husband, her cool composure. It is the mask, Hastings. Beneath it, there is fire. Yet the most striking line came from Dr. Phelps. Poirot had remarked upon the faint perfume in the study. That evening he asked her again, casually, what scent she favored. None at all, she replied firmly. I dislike perfumes. Poirot bowed politely, but when she had gone, he turned to me with a smile. She lied hastily. How can you be sure? Because, my friend, this morning in the surgery I observed her handkerchief, fallen upon the floor. It carried the fragrance of violet, delicate, subtle, unmistakable, and the same fragrance lingers in the study. She was there that night, yet she denies it. Poor boy, I was stunned. Then she might have been the last to see him alive. Exactly. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And to lie about it, Hastings, is more suspicious than to admit it. Remember that. By the close of the day, Poirot had amassed a catalogue of deception. Clara's secret love affair, concealed from her uncle, Bellamy's financial entanglements, threatening his reputation, Lady Evelyn's mysterious correspondence from London, Dr. Phelps's denial of her presence in the study, betrayed by perfume, Charles's lies about his midnight walk. Do you see, Hastings? Poirot said as we sat in the drawing room, the fire casting restless shadows. Each of them has lied, each has concealed, and each had cause to fear Sir Alistair. But surely, I protested, they cannot all be guilty. Poirot spread his hands. No, but in their lies, they reveal themselves. It is not the truth that betrays Hastings, but the inconsistency. And already, I see the threads crossing. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Mark my words, the killer lies not once, but twice. To lie once is human, to lie twice is fatal. That night the house lay in uneasy silence. I fancied every door creaked louder, every window rattled more ominously. Clara slipped by in the corridor, her face pale as a ghost. Bellamy shut himself away in his room. Lady Evelyn drifted like a shadow to her boudoir. Dr. Phelps remained late in the library, writing letters. And Poirot, serene as ever, polished his mustaches and declared, "The lies, they are surfacing. Tomorrow, Hastings, the truth will begin to break." The tension within Rosewood Manor had become almost unbearable. Even the servants moved with strained faces, whispering in chorus, as though fearing to be accused themselves. The family kept to their rooms, avoiding one another where possible, yet every meal brought them together in brittle silence. I confess I longed for escape, but Poirot, serene and determined, held us fast. It was on the third morning after Sir Alistair's death that the break came. Poirot had requested that the household gather once more in the long gallery. His manner was courteous, but I detected in his voice a subtle steel that brooked no refusal. One by one they arrived. Lady Evelyn, majestic yet pale, Charles, frowning and restless, Clara, with red-rimmed eyes, Bellamy, stiff and self-contained, Dr. Phelps, calm but with a tightness about the mouth. Poirot stood before them, hands joined, his egg-shaped head gleaming in the pale light from the tall windows. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "forgive me if I intrude once more upon your grief. But the truth, she does not reveal herself to politeness. We must prod, we must question, we must endure the little discomforts. It is necessary." No one replied. Poirot's gaze traveled slowly over the group. "Each of you has been less than frank. Each of you has lied. And lies, they are like cracks in porcelain. They widen, they spread, until the whole vessel shatters." Charles made a sound of protest, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, monsieur. I accuse no one yet. But I will say this. The murderer among you has already betrayed himself, or herself, by lying twice." There was a stir. Clara gave a low gasp. Bellamy cleared his throat. Lady Evelyn's hands tightened in her lap. Poirot continued, his voice gentle. "I ask again, who was in the study after Sir Alistair retired? Someone was there, I know it. Someone left the perfume of violets. Someone snapped the rose. Will no one speak?" For a long moment there was silence. Then, suddenly, Clara rose to her feet. Her face was white, her hands trembling, but there was a strange light of defiance in her eyes. "It was I," she cried. "I was in the study that night." There was a collective gasp. Charles sprang up, exclaiming, "Clara, no!" Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed. Bellamy muttered something inaudible. Dr. Phelps turned sharply, her lips pressed tight. could not give him up, so I crept down to the study. The door was not yet bolted. He was at his desk. He looked at me with such fury. He broke off, shuddering. He said I had disgraced the family, that he would cut me off without a penny, that I was no better than a servant girl. He struck the desk with his hand. I ran from the room. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. That was the voice I heard, the quarrel. It was mine. I lied because I was afraid. But I swear, Monsieur Poirot, when I left him, he was alive. Poirot let her sob for a moment, then spoke softly. You see, Hastings, the truth, she comes at last. Mademoiselle has told us much. But mark, she says the door was not yet bolted. That means Sir Alistair was alive before 11. Later, someone returned, killed him, and staged the scene. Her lie, it concealed fear, not guilt. Charles seized Clara's hand. I knew it. She couldn't have done it. But why not say so before? Poirot raised his brows. Because, monsieur, shame and fear are powerful. She thought you all would believe her guilty. But now the truth is out, and the time of death is narrowed further. Sir Alistair died not at midnight, but shortly after Mademoiselle left him, between 11 and 11:30, perhaps. Bellamy interjected, his voice sharp. That proves nothing. Anyone might have gone in there. Just so, said Poirot quietly. Anyone, including those who did not. His gaze fell, for an instant, upon Dr. Phelps, who returned it with steady eyes. Lady Evelyn rose abruptly. This is intolerable, she declared. You torment us with these insinuations, Monsieur Poirot. If you have proof, produce it. If not, patience, madam, Poirot said softly. The proof, it comes, like a seed that sprouts when the time is right. Clara's confession had shaken the household. Though Poirot did not name her guilty, suspicion hung heavy in the air. Charles hovered protectively by her side, glaring at Bellamy, whose expression was unreadable. Lady Evelyn swept from the gallery with imperious disdain. Dr. Phelps lingered a moment, her eyes fixed upon Poirot, before turning away to be silent. When we were alone, I exclaimed, Poirot, this proves Clara innocent, really? She admitted she was there, but left him alive. Poirot nodded. Just so, Hastings. It clears her of the direct act. Yet it also tells us something more important, that Sir Alistair intended a terrible vengeance upon her. He threatened to cut her off. That makes the codicil not only plausible, but almost certain, and whoever destroyed that codicil had a reason to fear its terms. Who would that be? I asked eagerly. Poirot smiled faintly. That, my friend, is the question, and soon the answer will come. Already, the mask slips. Already, the lies begin to contradict one another. Tomorrow, perhaps, another will break, and then his eyes gleam. Then we shall see the face of the murderer. That night, as I lay awake, Clara's sobs still echoed in my mind. She had spoken the truth at last, but her truth only deepened the shadows around us. For if she was innocent, then one of the others, cold, composed, and still among us, had struck the fatal blow. The household assembled in the long gallery at Poirot's command. The great windows admitted a pallid September light, gray as tarnished silver. Outside, the lawns glistened with the dew of early morning. Inside, the air seemed heavy with suspense. The Greville ancestors stared down from their gilt frames, stern witnesses to what was to come. Poirot, neat and precise, stood at the center like the conductor of an orchestra about to begin. Inspector Graves had returned from town and sat heavily at a side table, his notebook before him, though his face betrayed skepticism. Charles, restless, paced to and fro. Clara clung to a chair, pale but resolute. Lady Evelyn sat upright, her hands folded tightly, her expression marble cold. Bellamy leaned on the mantel, his eyes flicking nervously from Poirot to the other. Dr. Phelps stood slightly apart, her chin high, her gaze steady, though a faint flush touched her cheeks. Poirot began in his most courteous tone. Mesdames et messieurs, the moment has arrived. 4 days we have lived under the shadow of suspicion. Each of you has concealed something, each of you has lied. But lies, they are like a poor plaster. They cover the crack for a little, but soon Let us proceed step by step. Sir Alistair was found in his study, the door bolted from within, the revolver in his right hand. Yet the wound was on the left temple. Already, it is strange. But the murderer wished us to believe it was suicide. For that purpose, he staged the wound. The clock was stopped at 11:10. The roses were snapped and scattered. The bolt was oiled, that it might slide noiselessly. Even the revolver was placed for effect. It was, as I said, a little theater. His eyes traveled slowly around the group, but the theater betrayed the actor. Why? Because it was too elaborate. A suicide does not stage his own death for an audience. He turned towards Clara. You, mademoiselle, told us of your secret love, of your quarrel with your uncle. You confessed at last that you went to him, that he raged, that you fled. That was brave of you, and it clears you, for you left him alive. Clara gave a little sob of relief. Poirot shifted to Charles. You, monsieur, quarreled with your father over money. You lied about your walk on the terrace. That was foolish. Yet your lies were those of shame, not of guilt. You feared to be thought undutiful, not murderous. And your temperament is too hot, too impulsive, for such careful staging. Charles drew a deep breath, color flooding his cheeks. Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Evelyn. You, madam, with your mysterious correspondence, your disdain for your husband. He may have discovered your letters, your secrets. You have reason to wish him silent, and yet you are proud and cold. Would you stoop to theatricality? No. The breaking of roses, the childish stopping of clocks, that is not your style. You kill with words, madam, not with pistols. Lady Evelyn's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Bellamy. Monsieur, you stood to lose money. Your financial speculations were known to Sir Alistair. If he exposed you, your career was ruined. You had access to his papers, to his study, and yet you are a man of law. Your instincts are for concealment, for subtle alteration of documents. But violence, the pistol, the melodrama, it is not in your hand. Bellamy shifted uncomfortably. Poirot's voice grew sharper. And so we come to you, madam. His eyes fixed upon Dr. Phelps. She started, but her composure did not entirely desert her. To me? Yes, to you. You were close to Sir Alistair once. You quarreled, perhaps, but still you cared. You advised him on his health. You alone could have persuaded him to take a draught, to trust your counsel. You were seen last in the library, but in truth you went to the study. You denied it, but the perfume betrayed you. Violets, delicate and rare. It lingered in the room, and your handkerchief told the tale. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Poirot pressed on, relentless. It was you who sat at his desk and broke the glass of the concert. Not his hand, but yours, betrayed by the slam upon the blotter. You hoped to alter his will, to secure a place for yourself, or to protect Clara, perhaps both. But Sir Alistair discovered you. There was a struggle, angry words, and then you seized the revolver. You shot him. Lies, she cried hoarsely. I did no such thing. Poirot lifted his hand. Permit me. After the shot, you arranged the scene. You stopped the clock. You bolted the door from outside. Oh, with the hatpin bent and scarred from forcing the bolt. You oiled it first, that it should slide easily. Then you left through the corridor, silent as the storm began. The room appeared sealed. But the truth leaks like light through a shutter. A horrified silence fell. Clara clutched Charles's arm. Lady Evelyn stared rigidly ahead. Bellamy's spectacles gleamed. Graves leaned forward, his pencil forgotten. Dr. Phelps drew herself up, her face white. You cannot prove this. Poirot's eyes shone. But I can. The missing key, found in your medical bag, it opens the study. The blue ceiling lamps, also in your possession. And your perfume, madam, still lingers in the curtains. It is enough. There was a long pause. Then, with a strange little laugh, Dr. Phelps let the mask slip. Yes, she whispered. It is true. I killed him. Clara gave a cry, but Dr. Phelps silenced her with a gesture. He rose, heavy and grim. "Margaret Phelps, I must arrest you for the murder of Sir Alistair Grievous." She straightened, dignity in her bearing, though tears rimmed her eyes. "It was worth it," she said quietly. "For what? You could not win." She was led away. For a long while no one spoke. At last Clara whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, you saved me." Poirot shook his head. "No, mademoiselle, I say only the truth. It is not my task to comfort or to condemn, only to arrange what is hidden until it is clear." Later, as we prepared to leave Rosewood Manor, I could not help but reflect upon the strange blend of passion and logic that had led to the solution. "Poirot," I said, "was she right? Did Sir Alistair deserve his fate?" Poirot paused, smoothing his mustaches. "Mon ami, that is not for us to say. No man deserves to be murdered. And yet, one may say that some plant the seeds of their own destruction. Sir Alistair was such a man. But the act, it was still wrong. Always, murder is wrong. Remember that." As we drove away from Rosewood Manor, the house loomed behind us, silent and somber, its windows blank like sightless eyes. The storm had passed, the murderer unmasked, yet a shadow lingered, the shadow of pride, of passion, and of a crime that logic had untangled, but the heart could never wholly forgive. Poirot sat very still beside me, his head bowed, his eyes closed. At last he murmured, "It is finished. Come, Hastings. We go to London. There is too much damp air in the country. It does not suit the mustaches." And with that, the case of Rosewood Manor closed. Another chapter in the annals of Hercule Poirot's triumphs, where vanity and pride